What is up, YouTube? It is me again, back with another video. I don't know why I decided to change the intro. I was just feeling a little more energetic, so I did. So this is the second part of my color palette challenge, and this is the fourth, fifth, and sixth drawing in the set. So this first one, you could see in the beginning, a little bit of me messing around, and for this one I decided to do a little more color theory to sort of blend the different colors and create new colors. I wanted to try and challenge myself to create a skin tone with the blues and browns and reds and yellows that I was given. I also wanted to challenge myself to do a dynamic fighting pose, which was really hard. You could see me in the beginning sort of making a little net on top of the reference, and then this is me then going back in and refining it. The sort of circles and sketchy lines is how I started the third drawing in the last color palette challenge video. You will notice another common theme here where I did the all solid color upper lip on her. It was at this point that my hypercam broke. I lost about 15 minutes of footage in which I drew the rest of the arm. I was not fast enough to read that. Okay. But yes, this one I decided to challenge myself with a little more color theory. And I saw the colors red and blue, and of course my first thought was an elemental, fire and water. More specifically, fire versus water. Water versus fire. So I was really excited to try a dynamic fight pose, and I ended up coming up with this guy, who has one amazing arm. The fire elemental has one amazing arm, and then one really derpy hand. Ultimately, I'm really proud of the water elemental overall. I think both of her hands turned out really good, which was something I was really worried about. I think the foreshortening looks pretty decent. I don't know that it's the best, but it looks pretty good, considering I've never really tried a pose like this before. I struggled a lot with what I wanted to do with her hair. I kind of started long and flowing, and I decided, no, let's try maybe short. And I thought maybe let's push the hair the other direction, and I ended up really liking this last short kind of choppy hairstyle. I don't know why, because that's not usually what you think of. I also really struggled with the fire elemental's hair, to the point that I eventually just covered all his hair. I gave him a hood. I thought kind of an Assassin's Creed inspired hood would look really cool for him. I wanted to break a little from the norm. For her, I went with a kind of Aquaman-inspired type jumpsuit, a little like swimsuit almost. And for him, I decided to go a little more rugged Assassin's Creed type fighter, with this little sash that he's got at his waist. Originally I was going to do like a leather, I don't know, man corset. I don't know if there's a better way to phrase that, but there probably is. I did go with these sort of leather bracers that I thought were really interesting and added some sort of extra badassery to this character. I do apologize. I noticed while I was editing the last color palette challenge that I say a lot, and I really hope that doesn't bother you. So it's at this point that I started sort of messing with the colors for the skin. And I started with two different bases and sort of worked around to try and find two different unique skin tones for these characters. And I don't know how much I succeeded in diversifying the colors. I think I ended up with very much the same skin tone for both characters, but I like the skin tone I came up with. I wanted to go for a more tanned look. I would have ideally wanted the fire elemental to be a little darker skinned. I don't really know that there's a particular reason why. I wanted him to have a little bit darker skin. That was just sort of how I pictured him. But overall, I am pretty satisfied with how it came out. I think one of the things that I found interesting was how much blue I used in the fire elemental and how much orange I used in the water elemental. This was definitely a really good exercise in shading with complementary colors, because blue and orange are very much complementary colors. My father would probably also point out that they're, the Broncos colors, but that's okay, I don't follow football. But I really enjoyed the complementary color shading here. I started with the more similar colors and went over it with the darker areas in the complementary color, and I think it just added a lot of rich saturation to the pieces that was very interesting and fun to look at, so I was happy with that. Here I'm going in and just coloring in his pants, making sure all of his clothes are complete. I tried to make his pants and his shirt as different as possible, going so far as to use the soft light layer function, which did not end well. As you can see here, I ended up having to go back and clean up all of my lines again. But I'm very satisfied with what it did for the pants. It really sets them apart from the shirt. I think here with the boots, I went back and I changed them yellow. Yes, I did. Because I just thought the yellow boots went with it a little better and made the red belt the red belt stand out a little more. For the water elemental, I went with a bright blue sort of bathing suit. As you can see the little tassels on her quote-unquote sleeves, I almost wanted to be a sort of seaweed green, but they didn't end up coming out that way. I kind of imagine it to be sort of a corally type, I don't know, sea moss. Sea moss, no, that works. Sea moss is good. I gave her some bright blue nails because I thought those were interesting and fun to look at. I went back in. The line art was a challenge for me. It really was, because it was hard to find a good balance with all of these really saturated, bright colors, to find what good mixes and mediums I could use to make these very saturated, vibrant colors translate well with line art. And the way I mostly did that was by going in and just color theorying the hell out of it. It's the best way I can put it. Yes, and then here you see me kind of going back in and erasing some of the background. Now, the reason I did this was so that I would have the white for the areas where I erased to add a little highlight, while also being able to give a sort of interesting colored background. I didn't want to go in and do a whole scene around them. I just don't feel like I had enough diversity in the color. But I wanted to have this sort of interesting gradient in the background. And in order to keep all of my highlights the same and consistent, I had to go in and sort of manipulate the background a little bit. It's kind of cheating, I guess, but I don't think you guys minded in the last video that I cheated, so hopefully you won't mind here. This drawing of these two people, it took me so long. Oh my gosh. This was probably the longest drawing out of any of them, because not only did I do a fight scene that I was really not prepared for, but I did 2 entire bodies, and I did a lot of color theory and blending, and a lot of things that I really underestimated. So I hope it turned out. Now here I'm going in and I'm adding this gradient, and it's a very interesting gradient. I decided to go with the blue behind him and the oranges and reds behind her. Now it was at this point, as I was kind of fiddling with the light around her hands, that I realized I was going to have a lot of trouble doing water, so I made it sort of a more icy spray than water. And for the color palette, I decided to do a dynamic shape just to make it stand out a little. So I did these little diamonds. And that is the first or fourth drawing done. I'm really proud of it, and I hope you guys like it too. These next two drawings are a little shorter. This one I had some serious indecision about. I was looking at these greens and these olivey tones and what is essentially black. It's a really, really dark gray, but it was essentially black. So what I ended up deciding to do here was do a tree, which was harder than it sounded. I looked up a reference video on how to draw a realistic tree, but they were doing it in a traditional medium, so I was mostly just sort of guiding the lines a little bit. I ended up using a tool I don't usually use on Krita, and I think it gave it a very interesting texture. A lot of this drawing is me using the locked layer function and just using that to recolor these sort of splotchy, I don't know what kind of style you would call this. I really don't. I think it's an interesting style, and I really like how it came out. It came out very soft and almost sweet. This picture really kind of reminds me of this little foresty area that was down behind the park where I grew up as a little girl, and it reminds me of the trees that used to grow back there. So I feel like this is a very nostalgic painting for me, even though it is very simple. I had trouble placing the palette on that one, but I think the colors all stand out, and I think it's very simple and sweet and kind of has a little ray of sunshine look. So for this last one, you can probably already tell what I'm drawing, badly at this point, very badly. I am drawing a little rose. So I had a bunch of pinks and one really light green, and I really wasn't sure what to do. I considered a lot of things. I looked up pink drawings, and flowers just kind of kept coming up. So I decided I was going to draw a flower. Very simple, very uncomplicated flower, and I tried to give it as much depth and richness as I could. But really, I wasn't overly happy. One interesting thing I will note here, one of the things that made this drawing quite as time-consuming as it was, is the strategy that I'm doing here. So in order to give each petal a little independent definition, I'm creating several petals on different layers. So that way when I go back in and I lock the layer, I can give each petal some independent shading that won't affect the petals directly around it. So that way I don't have to do a lot of careful erasing, and I don't have to be as careful about where my shading is. So I basically did it so that I didn't have any of the petals that were being currently colored in right next to one that would also be affected. And this ended up being really helpful. I don't remember really how long it took me to do this one, but really it wasn't a difficult process. This little flower did not take me very long at all. But I'm really happy with how it came out overall. It's simple, but I think it's pretty and kind of elegant. So I hope you guys agree with me. It got towards the end and I was like, I really haven't used this green. So I went back in and I cleaned up all of the little lines and gave a little subtle gradation? Is that how you say that? I'm doubting myself now. I could be wrong. Gave a little subtle gradient, there we go, in the leaves, and then a little background gradient as well. I wanted to have the middle come out a little further, but overall, I'm pretty happy with this one. What do you think? So that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it was everything you wanted it to be and more, and I will catch you guys on the flip side. Okay, bye.